Hashem, the Almighty, blessed be He, is the Yesod of the world. Yesod. He is like the hidden foundation of the world, but yet He's revealed. Right? Yesod is a foundation. Yesod, foundation.
So foundation.
Yesod. All right. So a few comments. You can write these down as notes if you would like. Sefira means counting. This is also the term that's used in Kabbalah to refer to the 10 Sefirot, which are often translated as emanations. But the fact that it means counting is one of the indications that the earlier understanding of the Sefirot was not in a Gnostic sense of emanations from God, right? The Sefirot are not Gnostic type emanations of some sort of existence or being or entity that kind of morphs out of God, but is not directly created, but is kind of like an eternal emanation. That's not the authentic meaning of Sefirah in the context of Jewish mysticism. Not in authentic Jewish mysticism. It is often understood that way in what has become pop mysticism, which people should be very careful with. So if anybody has heard of the 10 Sefirot, the 10 emanations, in quotes, understand that understanding those 10 Sefirot as actual emanations is not representative of authentic classical Torah Judaism. In the earliest texts where the Sefirot are mentioned in some sort of a mystical sense, they do not understand it. They're not intending it as emanations. The word literally just means counting. And it's a counting of the ways in which God relates to us, interacts with us through his different created works. Okay, so it's not a reference to some sort of uh, Godhead, heaven forbid. It's not a reference to multiple existences within the God of Israel, heaven forbid. Right? It's just a reference to the counting of his ways. He relates to us with mercy. He expresses acts of judgment towards us. He reveals uh, his mighty deeds. Okay, that's Gevurah. Right? These are not tangible, independent existences, nor are they actual, literal existences that emanate from God in any sort of like um, pantheistic or polytheistic or uh, Godhead type theology. Rather, it's just a reference to counting his ways. That's the authentic sense of Sefirah. It's relevant to the counting of the Omer because in many popular devotionals, for lack of a better word, they kind of have things akin to like a daily devotional that are popular in the Jewish world that are followed during the 49 days of counting the Omer in traditional Judaism. And because the Gnostic type of uh, quote unquote Kabbalah has pervaded the Jewish world, unfortunately. So a lot of these devotionals are filled with references to the so-called emanations, the Sefirot, and you will see references to Hesed, Gvurah, etc. These are perfectly fine to think about as long as we know that this is not an ancient tradition of the Jewish people to ascribe a certain Sefirah in the sense of a quote unquote emanation to each day of the counting of the Omer. That is not classical Judaism, but it's a perfectly fine custom. It's even a nice custom if we understand it as aligning our ways, our actions, our deeds, and our modes of thought, aligning them with God's ways, i.e., walking in his ways as we're commanded to do in the Torah. But if we understand those devotionals when they talk about Hesed, Gvurah, Netzach, etc., if we're understanding that in the sense of joining with a certain entity that is some kind of an emanation from God, that's idolatry. We have to stay away from that, especially if you're crying out to those entities as if it's an entity instead of crying out to the Creator, blessed be He, whose unity is not composed of different distinct parts. Okay? So we do refer to God as the merciful one, the mighty one, etc. But these are not references to distinct entities within him. but rather we're referring to him as the source of the mighty acts we see in this world. And that's perfectly fine. Um, it's a dangerous mentality that's pervasive now, unfortunately, that we have to be careful of. So safira means counting, and because of medieval Gnostic tendencies, they've understood the counting of God's ways as emanations. So now it's kind of a precarious path that we follow during this time, sadly. So I'm just trying to help you guys have a safeguard against that and know how to protect yourself from those um, non-Jewish philosophies that have invaded the Jewish faith. It's a form of ideological colonization, sadly, and we have to free ourselves from that. All right. Milah haba'a Omer, that's sheaf, the barley sheaf. Sa'ara is barley, qasir, right? And we get down to um, harvest. That's related to bringing the barley sheaf, which is part of the harvest, is the kind of a first fruit of the harvest that we do on the day after the first day of Passover. And then tikkun midot is the popular idea of repairing our character traits with each day of the Omer. Midot literally means a measure of something, a measure, but it also gets used to refer to traits. So it's a standard or a measure as well, from the verb limdod, to measure. Esed is devoted loving kindness. Okay, and these are here listed because they are popular names of the Kabbalistic Sefirot, the Kabbalistic quote unquote emanations. Right? And who can tell us how it is possible to understand these in a kosher way as opposed to a non-kosher way? Right? They're in popular Jewish mysticism, you have what's called the 10 Sefirot, the 10 emanations of the Ein Sof. I'm assuming several of you guys have heard of that. How can we understand that in a kosher way, in a way that is in harmony with God's Torah, as opposed to the problematic ways? Anybody wants to share their thoughts or summarize what we've learned here?
Aren't they God's traits?
Excellent, excellent. Now, if we understand God's traits as being independent existences within him, so that he's composed literally of parts, that's problematic. It's not monotheism, because there are people who will actually pray to an individual safira. This exists in the Jewish world, unfortunately. That's polytheism. That's reverting back to the mistake of, for example, in Hinduism, where they recognize that there's like a cosmic power that's manifest with different forces, but then they worship each force as a separate power. They
Hmm.
turn the different traits of God into separate gods. In every lie, there's truth. There's no power to a lie. There's no effect to it unless there's an element of truth to it. The element of truth is that God does manifest in many different ways, but all these different manifestations are not reflective of a multiplicity of the Creator in the Creator himself. Rather, they're a multiplicity in his revealing himself in different ways, right? So that's the truth in the lie of idolatry. And of course, the individual idolaters, they're not intentionally lying. They're not lying because they don't know, they're confused. But the idea as a concept, it's a lie. It's falsehood. So the 10 sefirot, the 10 traits of God, it's not that his traits are limited just to that, but more importantly, these traits do not represent a plurality of divinities. That's idolatry. That's polytheism. Instead, they reflect the fact that the one God reveals himself in many wondrous ways. Okay, that's the idea. Mr. Victor, are you still with us? I think he's just kind of got his account on, but he's actually gone to a ball game, eating a hot dog while we're well, this could be just picking. I'm just picking. He's not feeling well. We need to remember him in our prayers. Miss Heather, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Can you express in your own words the treacherous and precarious path of the Sefirot during this time, what we need to watch out for, and how we can understand it in a kosher way?
We need to be careful not to separate God's traits from him, as has been done by many peoples and many cultures throughout history
Yes.
and still now.
So, and
Um,
what do you mean not separate them from him? What do you mean and what do you not mean?
not to understand his traits to be separate entities, but to all
Excellent.
be a way of describing aspects of his being that are all a part of him.
Yeah. So they're just ways that we refer to God through uh, our recognition of his different acts.
Right.
So, on the one hand, God does reveal himself in different ways with different types of mighty deeds. But we have to recognize that, number one, these are created actions. They're not eternal, independent existences. They're created actions that are reflective of the one eternal nature of God, right? There's only one nature of God. There's only one absolute independent being. And there are not multiple beings that together make God. It's just
He
one
doesn't
being.
he doesn't have multiple personalities. He's one
Correct. Correct.
entity.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And so when we say God is merciful, there is not God and then his mercy, two separate things that are eternal. But rather, God and his mercy, they're one and the same. It's the same thing. And it's revealed through multiple actions. All right. And then we have God and his justice, right? But it's not that God exists eternally and then there's a separate thing called justice that exists eternally. And they're both God, but they're distinct. So God and his just acts are distinct, but God and his justice as who he is, that's one and the same, absolutely the same thing. They're equivalent, right? It's not something that's appendaged onto him. This is very important to understand. And we refer
Question.
to, yes, ma'am.
Would roles, the word roles, work here because I'm a mother and a woman and I'm all these things, but I'm
Yeah,
one person?
absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And when we say roles, we're referring to um, here we're referring to how you relate to different people or to different things. And so that's relating to how you are revealed through different actions. It's a very good
Mhm.
analogy. Very good
Okay.
analogy. The multiplicity of terms to describe the different ways you interact with people, that doesn't mean you are different people, right? That's crazy. It also doesn't mean that there's like a separate brain somewhere in your body for being mother and a separate brain that is the teacher and a separate brain that is the wife. It's all the same brain, you know? And of course, these analogies are not perfect. God doesn't have two hemispheres of a brain, but we get the idea. You have two hemispheres of your brain, but you have potentially 100 different roles. That doesn't mean you're 100 different hemispheres of your brain. It's the same person behind it all. But with God, it's not even two hemispheres. God is one in a way that is not countable. And it's not countable in that it's such a high number. It's that the concept of counting does not even apply to God. He transcends. His greatness is infinitely and unimaginably beyond the concept of number. When we say he's one, we do not mean that he is one like like one among multiple different things. So we don't mean he's one God among many. We are not saying that he is one in the sense of one that can be counted. We cannot count him. In order to be subject to counting, it has to be finite. When we say God is one, all we're trying to say is that he is not multiple. He is not multiple, and there is none other like him. That's what we mean when we say he's one. He's one, unlike any other one. And he's most,
Incomparable.
yes, incomparable. That's right. And we use multiple words to refer to him. because of the limitations of human speech, because we're bound in time. But the reality is, and this is a fundamental of Torah Judaism, the ancient and authentic faith of the prophets of Israel. It's a fundamental to understand that although we use all these different terms, the reality is that they're all one and the same, truly, absolutely equivalent, not just equal in nature, but equal identity. They're all the same absolute one, right? So that when we say God and his mercy and his wisdom, we are not talking about God and then some other concept or entity that's appendaged onto him or part him. Rather, God and his wisdom is absolutely one and the same. It's not God and then God's wisdom, right? He and his wisdom is absolutely the same. And then the expression of his wisdom, that's something different. His wisdom created, uh, uh, not created, but his wisdom reflected in us. That's something distinct, okay? But it's coming from him, coming from his wisdom, which is him, same thing. Same thing with his knowledge. God and his knowledge, his knowledge is not something added onto him. This is one of the ways in which his knowledge is fundamentally different. It's inherently, essentially different from human knowledge. Okay? Human knowledge is not identical to our essence. It gets added onto us. As we learn things, it gets added on and assimilated in, right? But it's still in some ways distinct. With God, he and his knowledge are synonymous. It's the same thing. But we can't talk about these things without using different words. We are forced by the limits of human speech to use multiple words. But he and his knowledge is the same thing. His knowledge is not something that here's God and then here's his knowledge, and over time it gets added and attached to him. No, no, no. God and his knowledge is one and the same. From eternity, which we don't even mean it in the sense of time, we mean before time. He and his knowledge were identical, and it was perfect and complete. So he knows all things without it being added onto him. He knows all things independent of needing to experience those things. It's identical. So God and his knowledge and his wisdom and his mercy, all of these are one and the same. One and the same blessed God who is deserving of the highest praise. Baruch Hu uvaruch Shemo. Blessed be he and blessed be his name. Okay, so we are made in his image, so we see these different revelations of his glorious nature manifested in us, but we should not mistake that manifestation for the sublime one who is revealed through them. Okay, so the different manifestations are not he himself in multiplicity, but they're all pointing back to the one source.